So, Dr. Alan Bauman, MD, a leading expert in hair restoration and hair loss treatment, and CEO of the internationally renowned Bauman Medical. Dr. Bauman is a dynamic speaker who shares cutting edge insights into biohacking and hair restoration, helping people regain both their hair and confidence. Disclaimer: any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. So, Alan, I'm really excited about this subject because I know a lot of people are, as they go through life, different stages, challenged with hair loss, maybe a little bit in losing confidence and challenged with this. But I would love to know where your passion and drive comes from. You've been doing this, as you mentioned before the show, for like 30 plus years. Where did your drive come from to help people so much with their hair?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, after I graduated medical school, I never thought that I was going to go into hair transplantation or hair restoration. That really wasn't even on my radar. But what I had done in the early days, even when I was in high school, is I watched a plastic surgeon operate. And he was a close friend of the family. He mentored me for many, many years. And I had this incredible opportunity to see how he changed lives using surgical skill with artistry and his incredible bedside manner. What I knew that I wanted to do something cosmetic and surgical. And so after medical school, I went into general surgery, always thinking that plastic surgery was going to be the thing. And it wasn't really until I had met a hair transplant patient, and not a patient of mine, actually, because I was not doing anything other than being a surgical resident, but he was a patient coming in for a cosmetic surgical procedure, and it had been listed on his chart that he had had a hair transplant. And I was fascinated by that because when I met him, he looked like he had a full head of hair. And so we got into this brief conversation about his hair transplant and who he went to, how it went. Obviously, told him I was blown away because this hair looked completely natural and undetectable. I was expecting, because he said he had a hair transplant, that it was going to be pluggy looking, and it certainly wasn't looking like that at all. So it was a quick conversation, but in those maybe short minutes, 15, 20 minutes, he told me about the techniques, the technology, how he chose the doctor. And the other thing that he told me about was how it changed his life. And that's one of the things that really stuck with me. He said that socially and professionally, his life was never the same. It was way better. And so what he had noticed is that, and he showed me pictures actually of his wife and kids, and he was telling me about his success in business and all of that. And he really dialed it down to the fact that when he had the hair loss situation, it was really affecting him emotionally. And once he got the hair back, his whole life was different. His whole outlook was different. His self-confidence, his self-esteem was totally, completely different. And that enabled him to meet the love of his life, obviously to and have a family, and also change his career and do a bunch of different things that had set out to do. So I kind of tucked that away in the back of my head, like, oh, wow, hair transplant, maybe it's come a long way than the old style plug type transplants that I'm used to seeing. And I started my journey basically looking around in the clinical literature and then going to conferences, eventually visiting physicians who were doing state-of-the-art work, single follicle implantation. And I figured I would maybe add that to my repertoire as a plastic surgeon, thinking about working with my mentor, who was already very well established in plastic surgery. Maybe I could add this. And later on, as I got more in-depth into it and completed a fellowship, a preceptorship program in hair transplantation, I then realized that I had to do it full-time as a subspecialty, as a true specialty of medicine, and not just do it kind of as a part-time gig. But, I've had the blessed opportunity to change over 30,000 patients' lives, treating men and women every single day who are dealing with a hair loss situation. And here at Bauman Medical, we have a lot of fun. I have over 35 team members, an associate physician, nurse practitioner, many surgical team members, administrative team members, and we have a really good time helping people on their journeys. I mean, I remember that first person that I met who had that undetectable transplant like it was yesterday. But here we are now, 14,000 procedures later, and it's still fun. We have a great time doing it. We change people's lives every day, Johnny.
Oh, wow. So that's so interesting how you just like observe the difference from someone from having like no hair to getting that hair transplant and having their life change and seeing how that actually transformed their whole life, like you said, their relationships, their business, everything like that. That's so amazing. And then how you went down that route as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I get to see it every single day, how
Mm.
those people's lives have changed. And that's the fun part of having a practice like this, that every day, 6 months ago, we started that patient's journey on their hair transplant. Today, they're halfway grown in, and another 6 months, they'll be fully grown. Or even folks who are just starting to lose their hair. We see young guys, 20% of men in their 20s are dealing with hair loss. And many of them turn to baseball caps or camouflage or avoiding social situations because of it. It's really taking a toll on their mental status and their quality of life, their sense of identity. And so when we can change that trajectory, even if it's just keeping the hair the same for
Mm.
some period of time, put them in a holding pattern so they're not losing, they're not shedding, they're not receding. I mean, that's a huge turnaround for most guys and women too who are dealing with a hair loss situation because again, we say hair is a very emotional organ.
And do you, just from like your understanding of people like losing their hair or kind of it going, is it like kind of a biological thing, or is it psychological? Or can it be both?
Well, we know the causes of hair loss today. Most of the causes of hair loss today is genetically determined. So if you want to know what your risks are of if you're going to go bald or not, you should look at your family tree, right? So
Mm.
go find your parents on Facebook and check out their photos. Look for pictures of your parents and grandparents, obviously, to get an idea of what's going on. If you have a sibling, he's struggling with hair loss, you might be at risk out of it too. And hair loss can start anytime after puberty for both men and for women. For men, like I said, it can be early on in their 20s and 30s. For women, typically, usually they can see shedding around childbirth or early before menopause or during menopause. Their hair can really start to change. But it is genetically determined. And today we know exactly what the trigger is. We know biologically it's the sensitivity to a male hormone called DHT, dihydrotestosterone. So that's public enemy number one. DHT in your body is triggering the miniaturization or weakening of the hair follicle in that very recognizable pattern. The first thing you'll see is a little bit of recession in the hairline, then perhaps some thinning in the crown area. You're going to lose coverage. You're going to lose the ability to style your hair to cover your scalp eventually. And so without treatment, it will continue to progress with time. Now, some people keep their hair for decades longer. Maybe they don't see hair loss until their 50s or 60s. Other folks, like I said, can have aggressive hair loss and they can lose their hair 20s or 30s. Like my dad. My dad lost his hair when he was, by the time he was 30 years old. And by the time he was in his 40s, he was already in a hairpiece.
Mm. Oh wow. But can there be, I'm just curious that like sometimes there's a lot of stress in the world and people got this. Can that, the genetics makes a lot of sense for me because you can see like in families like maybe the son loses his hair and the dad's lost his hair. Like I have a good friend, their whole family, they've lost their hair. They all got no hair on top of their head, they got beards and stuff, but yeah,
So, like, what
can
are the other effects, right?
yeah,
So,
can things
you know,
like, like psychology, like stress impact hair loss?
well, absolutely. So
Mm.
we know the hair follicle is a very complex mini organ and it's sensitive to many things. Your
Mm.
nutritional status. Are you well nourished and with the right nutrients and fuel? What is the level of inflammation in your body? If you have inflammation at the scalp, it can shut down those hair follicles. Stress and cortisol can be a killer for hair. And we saw this really primarily through the pandemic when people were locked down, they're away from families, they couldn't work out, they couldn't go outside, they got arrested on the beach. This caused a lot of stress, and we saw a massive acceleration of male pattern, female pattern hair loss when that occurred. And, it's just not unusual. We know that psychological stress and that means perceived stress, right? Or physiologic stress on the body can certainly impact hair follicle function. And it's a very outward sign of how you're doing internally. If you're healthy, you're going to grow good, thick, quality, healthy hair. That's why hair is important to people because it's an outward sign of our youth and vitality generally. And so when our hair starts to thin, like I said, it can really become a serious situation and people can experience a pretty serious decrease in their quality of life. But yes, so stress can induce what we call a telogen effluvium. That is a sudden shed. Usually the hair follicles will recover if the stress situation was temporary. If you're under chronic stress, however, that's when things can really start to accelerate in terms of your hereditary hair loss. So what can we do about that? Well, we can't really get rid of stress in the modern world, I have to tell you that. I mean, unless you're living on a desert island sitting on the beach somewhere, sipping a sweet drink out of a coconut or something. But, most of us, we need to manage our stress. And so we manage our stress with exercise, with nutrition, with proper sleep. Those are the main things. Everything from breath work to stretching to exercise can help out with stress, of course. So mental mindset is really, really important to help manage the stress of the day. And we all deal with stress. And that's just the issue of the modern world. But there are other things that you can do about stress. You can do sauna and steam. You can get a massage. You can use supplements like ashwagandha. In fact, we have an ashwagandha product that was very popular during the pandemic here at Bauman Medical. And that's a very, very popular way for patients who know that they're at risk for stress to kind of make themselves more adaptable to it. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen. It makes you more resilient to the stress that may occur. And that's going to be helpful because look, stress can not only knock your hair out, but it can knock out the pigment too. So you can go gray more quickly if you're under serious stress.
Oh, that's so interesting as well. Yeah, so yeah, sounds like it definitely can be both, like the genetic, could see that. Yeah, the
Other factors, right?
psychologically, what it does, like chemically to your hair color and to hair loss as well.
Yeah, when you're under stress, that cortisol, which is the stress hormone, obviously stress hormone is a survival tool, right? If you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, or, you're in a fire or a flood, you got to get out of there. That cortisol is helping your body be superhuman almost, but you don't want to be revving the engine to 9,000 RPM all the time. You don't want that cortisol to stick around that whole day. It should drop off towards the end of the day into the evening time. If it doesn't, if it stays high and constant, you're going to have stress on all kinds of organ systems, not just your hair, by the way. But the good news is that, again, you can mitigate that and you can treat that, and usually it bounces back. And there are non-invasive ways, treatments that we have in the office to stop someone from shedding if they are really in a serious shedding phase. As I mentioned, during the pandemic, COVID was a common trigger for hair loss, not just the stress, but also the illness, obviously the fever, hospitalization, also the vaccinations were also triggering a lot of hair loss, inflammation in the body. And so we have treatments that we do in the office that can help stop the progression of the shed, literally stop shedding, pushing growth factors and peptides through the skin and things like that. So there's a variety of things, but it all starts with the precision diagnosis. And that's what I would recommend to someone. If they're out there and they think that their hair is changing, whether it's the texture, the color, the amount, the quantity, the shed, or whatever, something's happening to your hair, you definitely got to seek some advice from a professional who can do some diagnostics. And we do, for example, density measurements, hair caliber measurements in different areas of the scalp. And that's part of the diagnosis. We're looking at your scalp under the microscope to see if there's inflammation or other factors that might be inhibiting the hair growth. And then we're taking a full-blown medical history from you to see, are there other things that may be affecting your hair, your lifestyle, your sleep-wake cycle, your nutritional status. Are you on a weight loss drug? Very popular today, right? These GLP-1 agonists are super popular. People losing a lot of weight, decreasing inflammation, but also losing a lot of hair at the same time. There's a lot of ways that we can mitigate these problems.
I was gonna ask about Bauman Medical because it sounds like, I know you do like the hair transplants, but it sounds like you're doing the diagnosis to get people more specific on actually what the challenge could be, where it's coming from. So it's a combination of that and then some products as well. It sounds like, to help people kind of slow down. Yeah.
Well, Bauman Medical is really, I would consider like a 360-degree hair hospital. So, yes, of course, we do transplantation. That's what I'm trained in. I'm a board certified, full-time board certified hair restoration physician, and I've done transplants, over 14,000 transplants in my time, almost 15,000 in the past 30 years.
Right.
But what I've learned is that the transplant is the last thing that you need to do. The first thing is the precision diagnosis. So again, we said history and physical exam, microscopic exam. Maybe we do genetic testing to see what you're most likely to respond to in terms of therapies. We're focused on preservation first, keeping the existing hair follicles intact. So we have to protect the follicles before the irreversible loss occurs. Once the irreversible loss occurs, well, then you're going to need a transplant. And some people are just too far gone. They're going to need some degree of transplantation. And transplants are permanent. That's great. But your other hair is not. It's always at risk. So what that means is that there's a personalized strategy that's developed for every single patient that comes through the door, right? Based on their diagnosis, their goals, their genetic history, the examination of what's going on, we now can deliver a full-blown 360-degree approach, a holistic approach to their hair loss situation, fix those risk factors if we can, supplement the nutritional deficits or deficiencies, cool down any inflammation at the level of the scalp if we've discovered that, stimulate the hair growth. And it's not just pharmaceutical interventions anymore. There's biologic treatments, there's laser light therapy, there's nutritional supplements I mentioned. And all of that has to take place before we consider transplanting hair from the back of the scalp into the thinning or the balding area.
Got you. Okay, I love that 360 approach kind of and the holistic approach you're using as well. I wanted to touch on something you said earlier, like I often think of men, like just this is just me again, I'm always learning men when we're thinking about hair loss, but you have mentioned women as well. So hair loss is a thing with women often you find coming to you as well.
Absolutely. I mean, nearly half of our patients today through the door, thousands of patients every year are women. Women are experiencing a very, very significant thinning. Now, it looks different. It doesn't look like baldness. Like they're
Mm.
typically not going to look like a bald guy. You're not going to have, a female patient who's coming in with total baldness unless they have an autoimmune condition. And that's a separate diagnosis that we can treat, actually, by the way, with FDA
Oh
approved
wow.
medication. But most women who are dealing with hair loss, the hereditary hair loss, is a loss, a diffuse loss of hair around the frame of the face. And so what are they noticing? They're noticing that the volume of the hair is decreasing, that their part line is increasing in width, that their ponytail volume is decreasing. They may see more shedding in the shower or on the pillow or in the brush as they're styling their hair. And they may be doing different things to their hair to make their hair look better. They may be adding extensions or other hair additions or things like that. Or, they may be doing different types of treatments or products, for example, to make their hair just look better and fuller. And some of those can be good, cosmetically, but not so good biologically, and they can actually damage the hairs and also the hair follicle, which is under the skin, that mini organ that produces the hair. So the good news is that because the women are not looking bald, that means that typically that they have a lot of hair that can be rejuvenated or improved. Think of it like a garden, you approach the garden, some of the plants are wilted and weakening. You can use the fertilizer in the garden, you can use the sun and the water to get those plants to grow thicker, better, stronger. Make sure the soil is right on. And so that's a great analogy that we use oftentimes for our female patients. One of the most popular treatments for our female patients is platelet-rich plasma. That's a once a year treatment. It takes less than a lunch break. There's no recovery or downtime. It's a non-pharmaceutical treatment. We use the platelets that are spun right out of a blood sample that we take at the bedside, deploy them back into the scalp under a local anesthetic in a painless way, and that gives a boost of hair growth that lasts for about a year. It's super exciting technology. We've been doing it actually for 20 years. Over 14,000 of those treatments have been performed in my clinic, and it's a very powerful treatment, very good for women who are dealing with the hair loss situation. But you got to do it right. Some people say, oh, yeah, I'm doing PRP down at my med spa down the block. Well, unfortunately, your med spa is probably not creating a good quality PRP. They may be telling you, oh, you got to come back in month after month. That's how you know you're not getting the quality PRP.
Interesting. No, I'm fascinated because, like me, it's probably just by me being like a man. I just see guys like upset about it. But yeah, women are challenged by it as well. But you've definitely
Oh,
got a 360 approach to help them as well.
and the women that they want eyebrows restored, eyelashes restored. This is a very, very common thing. A lot of women have had plastic surgery and they're left with scars or missing sideburns or things like that, or they've had a procedure done in the brow lift area and then all of a sudden they're thinning and receding in that zone. It can be a very big problem, and a lot of women now are on hormone optimization therapy as they enter into menopause. Their hormones are decreasing, they're going on hormone optimization, which might include the typical female hormones but also may include testosterone. And as we said earlier in our conversation, sometimes testosterone, which creates DHT, can be the driver for female hair loss too. And so those treatments or those situations need to be treated as well.
How about something like alopecia? Do you have people coming to you with that challenge?
Well, alopecia is actually the term for any kind of hair loss.
Mm.
So you could have alopecia that is genetic, and that's androgenetic alopecia, male and female pattern hair loss. You could have a patchy alopecia, which sometimes happens to men. You might notice a bald spot that appears for maybe a few weeks in the beard and then regrows, or an area on the scalp, sometimes in young women. That's autoimmune alopecia or alopecia areata. Traction alopecia is what happens when you pull or tug on the hair, which hurts the hair follicle under the skin. And that's very common with women who wear either tight braids, wigs or weaves, or wear hair extensions. Traction alopecia can be completely 100% damaging to the follicle, meaning irreversible damage can sometimes be done. The way you know this is happening, for example, like someone who's plucked out their eyebrows to try to shape them, fortunately, later on, their eyebrow's not working at all. Their eyebrow's completely gone. What happened? Well, that's traction alopecia typically. So there's many, many different types. There's actually hundreds of types of alopecia.
Oh, wow.
But autoimmune alopecia, inflammatory alopecias that occur. One of the more common things that we see in women is a frontal fibrosing alopecia, where the hairline is receding all the way back due to exposure to nanoparticles and other things that are happening in the skin. So, I mean, there's a lot of science that goes in behind the diagnosis here to try to sort out what's going on. And I guess that's really important for your listeners to understand. Like if you're dealing with a hair loss situation, remember the hair follicle is a very sensitive barometer to your health. And there's no TikTok trend that's going to help you fix your hair situation. You've got to get an accurate diagnosis or you're going to waste time. And I guess the one take home message I would leave you with is that time equals follicles. And we say that because the time that you waste looking for some miracle vitamin or special shampoo or some TikTok trend or something, during that time, if you're not addressing the correct diagnosis with the correct treatment, you're losing hair follicles and maybe permanently over time.
Yeah, you could hear someone something. Yeah, I get where you're going with that. You could hear someone say, "Oh, that would be a good shampoo," or "that would be a good way to kind of look after your hair," but it might not be. It might be the opposite to what you need. So really understanding the diagnosis is key, and I love how you offer that to people.
Yeah, I mean, the diagnosis with the AI-driven microscopes and genetic testing, I mean, all of that is really, really important to get to the bottom of things. This is not like guesswork anymore. We really got it down to a science, which is nice.
And to maybe ask a very silly question right now, but I guess you only work with people who come into your like center. There's not anything you can sort of do online, or is it kind of an
Well,
in-person?
that's not true. Many of our
Okay.
patients, I mean, obviously we see thousands of patients per year that are flying in, coming in to Boca Raton, Florida for treatments and evaluations. I also have offices in New York
Hmm.
by appointment as well. We're internationally renowned, so we do have patients that come from all over. I happen to be listed in one of the top 20 doctors in the world, which, we're very proud and humbled by to be on that
Amazing.
list. And actually, it's a UK gentleman who puts that list together. His name is Spencer Stevenson, a very smart guy who evaluates clinics. And not that he's eliminating other clinics, but what he's trying to elucidate is what you should look for in a clinic. And so we're very proud. Been on that list for many, many years, almost a decade. But my point is that many of our patients start their journey through what I would call a virtual visit or virtual evaluation, just like we're here on Zoom today chatting. You could submit information, your medical history, your hair loss history. We want to know your age, height, and weight, and all of that stuff. What medications you've taken, what's your lifestyle factors, and you're going to submit some photos. The photos that we request tell us exactly what's going on. In terms of the pattern of hair loss, may not be able to measure the density, but we can see the coverage in each different area. And so we start our journey that way with many, many patients. And there are things that you can do at home. You can do what I call the hair homework, right? Hair homework is prescription medications, maybe topical or oral. If you're disinclined to use pharmaceuticals, then maybe you should think about a turbo laser cap. That's a laser light that's FDA approved for hair regrowth that you can use at home without any side effects whatsoever in just 5 minutes a day. Perhaps you need treatments at home, such as a microneedling or derma roller. That's another very popular treatment that patients will use at home, sometimes with a topical, sometimes without. And nutritional supplementation, of course. So if we know that you're on a weight loss program, let's supplement that with some collagen peptides, a good multivitamin, maybe biotin. If you're under stress, like we talked about, maybe the ashwagandha's there. If you've got some inflammatory issues or gut issues, let's think about a probiotic. So through our discussion, we start to elucidate that. And of course, if you can come in for an evaluation, get the measurements either here in Florida or in New York, great. That's going to be super helpful to really drive the diagnosis forward and drive the treatment plan into something that's successful. But yeah, there's a lot of many, many patients start their journey virtually and they request the evaluation right at the website, baumanmedical.com, Bauman Medical is the place to go to request that virtual evaluation and to start your journey there.
And do you have like individuals sort of working one to one, I guess, with these people as they go through the process to kind of support them?
Well, most of the patients are working one-on-one with me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No,
Oh,
I do have,
amazing.
as I mentioned previously, I have a nurse practitioner. I have an associate physician, Dr. Rose. She is amazing as well, hair transplant surgeon, very, very well trained, knowledgeable. So I have a very robust team of folks. And even my administrative people, many of them have been with me 20 years. The one thing is that you're going to find if you connect with the practice, you're going to find a compassionate and professional group of folks that will help you through your journey. And that's how we measure our success, literally one patient at a time. So, we're on your team. We're on your team to help you maintain the hair that you have and restore the hair that you've lost. And that's how we measure our success. So we measure our success by your success, honestly.
I love that. Alan, you got this like amazing, like excited, like driven energy that I love, that I'm seeing from you. I guess, does that come from just loving what you're doing and doing this and sort of looking after your own health, I'm guessing?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm totally blessed. I mean, I get a chance to perform the work that I do, which is totally fun and exciting. It's the state-of-the-art stuff. We're on the cutting edge of surgical techniques and regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy. I mean, we're talking about, I get to use the most powerful AI-driven diagnostic tools for the scalp that have been developed. I've been involved with developing the newer treatments, the latest diagnostic tools. So it's really a fun practice to have, as I said previously. But really, the payoff is just changing those people's lives one after another after another. I mean, look, yeah, I'm not going to see 20 people a day. That's just, I don't, there's not enough time in the world in the day to do that. But let's say if, patients are coming in and they're being seen at 6 months or 9 months and 12 months. I'm seeing those post-op patients and we're comparing their videos before and after. We're looking at their photos. We're seeing where the hair growth is coming in and getting to hear those stories of how they're loving the hair, how it's grown in and it's changing their lives reminds me every single day of that first person I ever met over 30 years ago. That kind of got me started and interested in this journey. Even though the technology back then was maybe not as good as today, it was a little bit more crude. It was a little bit more, unsophisticated, but I got the chance to help pioneer many of these great techniques and technologies. And, I didn't do it alone. I have some great colleagues and I stand on the shoulders of those who came before. But we're pushing this new technology really into the stratosphere. I mean, today, I'll give you an example. We are involved with hair follicle stem cell banking, so we can bank your hair follicles for the long run, much like women bank their eggs, for fertility purposes. We can bank your hair follicles so that eventually, maybe next 8 or 10 years, we'll have some hair cloning technology to work with. You'll have your youngest hair follicles in the bank. And this company surprised me. They have a treatment that even today they can make from your own hair follicle cells. So they make what we call a conditioned media, which is they cultivate the cells, they make 1 million cells in the laboratory, collect all the messages that come from those cells, and then send them back to us to deploy into the scalp. And we're involved in a breakthrough clinical trial, which is showing great improvement, not just in hair growth, but also in skin rejuvenation, using that derived specifically from your hair follicles. So, it's a super exciting tech, place to be, biotech world here in the world of hair restoration. And I get to play with all the goodies. I get to play with all the toys and the latest and greatest treatments.
That's amazing. There may be some, I'm just thinking for the person who's maybe tried something or tried like hair restoration, they've been trying a number of things, maybe they're a bit disheartened. Do you find people coming to you at all who are a little bit disheartened from what they've tried in the past?
Yes. Years ago, people would get disheartened by trying like an over-the-counter treatment like Rogaine or minoxidil, and they weren't sure if it's working. And sometimes genetically, we know people are predisposed not to respond that well to like over-the-counter treatments. Today, in just this past week, I saw a patient who came back from Turkey about a year ago, and they had a hair transplant procedure, and unfortunately, it was awful looking. It was very unnatural, and this patient was very upset about it, and we had a deep discussion about what could be done to really reconfigure the shape of the hairline to make it look more natural. What's happening around the world, I'm sure in the UK you've heard this, is that there are many medical tourist destinations out there, and much of it is unregulated, and that really creates what I would consider a black market, if you will, for procedures and treatments. And this is not new. We've heard of people traveling to third world countries for liposuction procedures. Turkey teeth is a thing currently. And honestly, I think they killed 6 people last year doing turkey teeth, which is unbelievable. Speaking from the point of view of my dad being a dentist, how someone would die during a dental restoration like that is beyond me. But my point is that in these clinics that are unregulated, where they're unsupervised, and there's very little artistry or even oversight whatsoever, patients are getting butchered and they're the walking wounded. And in many cases, some of them are almost irreparably damaged, like for a female patient with a male hairline or a straight hairline across, I mean, it's a disaster. For a man who's had all of his hair harvested around the sides and the back just to create a little tuft in the front, and he's completely bald because they didn't put him on medical treatments. It's a big disaster out there. So I think one of the things that I would like to impart to your folks out there who are following you and listening within the sound of my voice is that, a good hair transplant's not cheap, and a cheap hair transplant is generally not good. And not only is it not good, but it could put your life in danger. And there have been significant morbidity and mortality in some of these tourist destinations. So just be careful out there. If you're chatting with your doctor on WhatsApp and flying out to a procedure, and then they're sending you back on a plane that night bleeding with bandages, that's probably not a good plan of action. That's not good medical care, by the way. Sending patients back from surgery in a low oxygen environment like in a dirty airplane. I mean, that's not smart. So let's be smarter about choices that we make, and make sure you come back from these tourist destinations with both kidneys. That's a thing. But there's artistry and there's ethics and there's long-term planning that goes along with these types of procedures, and it really breaks my heart when I see patients that are very going to be very difficult to repair because of the harm that's been done to them in some of these other clinics. So, just do your due diligence, do your homework, take some time. This is not like, buying an insurance policy. This is like, you got to like really focus on this. This is what you're going to be looking at for the rest of your life. And hair loss is a chronic and progressive condition. So you better have a long-term strategy, not a quick fix commodity to get the job done. So I'll get off my soapbox there.
No, no, I think there's some important messages, especially around the due diligence and where you're going. But yeah, like what I got from like what you guys do at Bauman Medical is you do that diagnosis and really understanding what is right for the patient rather than just being like, here's a procedure.
No, the procedure should actually be the last thing
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
thinking about, not the first thing on the list of things to do. I mean, you may want to fix it, right? Like if I had a problem, I had a flat tire, I want to fix the tire. But if I realized that it was a broken rim or damaged rim that caused the flat tire, it'd probably be a good idea to fix that first before you fix the flat tire. Yeah, precision diagnosis, the preservation angle, which means keeping the existing hair growing strong so you don't have to come back and transplant in a year or two. Hopefully you'll be good for many, many, many years. That customized, personalized strategy for everyone's hair loss journey, putting the artistry and ethics into place, and then the stuff that we do for the future, right? Banking hair follicle stem cells, using regenerative medicine, leveraging whatever the latest and greatest scientifically backed treatments, again, not TikTok trends, but this is like, looking for the science is like sometimes a needle in the haystack when we're talking about social media, but that's really, really important. And we try to sort through all of that for patients.
Amazing. So, Alan, I'd love to know, as we kind of round off today, where is the best place for the listener to get in touch? They're dealing with maybe this and they want to get in touch, get some support from your services, or they want to get some more information from you. Where is the best place? And is there anything you'd like to leave us with today in terms of final words?
Yeah, sure. I think probably the most important message for someone out there who might be dealing with some hair loss or whether they've tried some things or not is get educated, get the information. And so if they go and visit baumanmedical.com, BAUMANMEDICAL.com, you'll find thousands of pages of information that I've written personally over the past 25 to 30 years that describes everything about hair loss diagnosis, the treatments that we provide, all of the strategies that we just discussed here briefly on this short little chit chat that we've had. And you can watch videos, you can watch thousands of hours of content that talks about the same treatments, procedures. You can hear testimonial patients who have gone through things just like yourself, whether it's an eyebrow loss or beard restoration or, using regenerative medicine to grow the hair thicker, better, stronger, lunchtime to procedures, or even the more heroic transplants. You can see all of that and get well educated. And then the next most important thing is if you just want to ask a question, there's a form there. You could just ask any questions. And as long as you send in a way to get the message back to you, like your phone number or your email, I promise that I will get back to you through my team and get you the answer to the question that you asked. But most importantly, for those who want an evaluation, there's a button there too, book evaluation, and that will get your journey started in the right direction so we can have a really detailed conversation about what's going on. If you're visiting us here locally in Florida or New York, we can do the deep dive discovery of AI-driven microscopes, look at the scalp health, look at the density that's available here and there. If you're a transplant candidate, talk about supply and demand, what's the long-term plan for the future, and how to create something that looks great. And so the take-home message is that hair is a very emotional organ. We talked about that. When you're losing your hair, it creates anxiety, depression. It's a downward spiral. When you take control of that, just like getting to the gym or creating something like writing a book or starting a business, your energy starts to change. And of course, when you visually see it happen, whether it's measurably on a microscope or months later, you're seeing it in the mirror, that's when the boost occurs, right? You start to feel that positive energy. I'll just leave you with what I always say, time equals follicles. And what that means is that for every day, week, month, or year that you kind of neglect your hair and say, I don't know if it's thinning, it's fine, it's whatever, it's going to get worse with time without treatment. It's not going to get any better. So if you have any level of concern at all, or just like to explore the options, then I would just encourage you to reach out. We can have a conversation, just like Johnny and I had a conversation today about this hair loss situation. But we can have a conversation and get you on the right path to whatever the goal might be.
Absolutely. I really appreciate, Alan, what you're doing to help people with their hair and build that confidence and help get them to where they want to be. So, yeah, I really appreciate your work, and I thank you for everything you've shared today.
Well, Johnny, thank you for the opportunity to share with your audience. And, like I said, if there's any questions anytime, we're here to answer.
Amazing. So you can get those links in the show notes below. So just click that. You'll be able to get to Alan's pages. You'll be able to submit those questions and get the support you need as well. So just click in the show notes below and those links will be there. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.